Good morning, Year 10, and welcome to another lesson on speeches. As you know, you're going to have to make a speech at some stage to the class. I want you to start thinking about what the subject of that might be. Don't worry too much about it. It's not till next year. It's not till year 11. So even if you change your subject between now and then, that's fine. But we need to perhaps think of one to be practicing on in the meantime. That's not what this lesson's about, but I want you to start thinking about it. So the do now is to think of 3 subjects you feel strongly about and write them down. It could be anything. I've done this for a couple of years now. So one girl did it a couple of years ago on coconut water. Somebody else did it on Greek philosophy, or bicycles, or martial arts, or football. That's always a big one. Anything like that that you can talk about for a few minutes. The subject is actually unimportant. No one's going to be marking you on what the content or the subject of your speech is. We'll be looking at how it is that you deliver it and how it's written. So just 3 subjects that you think potentially you could do that with. Anyway, that's 5 minutes for that. Write them down and go on to the next slide. Right, our learning objective today is to rewrite one of our speeches and make it as effective as possible. So your title that goes into your books. This is language, so yellow books. I've had a couple of queries. If just try and keep the language and the literature separately, but as long as you're doing the work, I don't mind. We can figure it out. So your title is Rewriting and Improving a Speech. Now these are the success criteria for speech writing. This is what the exam board want to see. Clearly structured piece, well organised and signposted. That'll make more sense in just a minute. Using discourse markers. Discourse markers are just words like however and whereas that sort of mark a change in direction perhaps of the speech. Just a posh way of saying that. Use of techniques appropriate for a speech. So when you make a speech, you know, you're talking to a room full of people rather than the intimacy of a letter. But we'll come to that too. Ambitious vocabulary, a range of punctuation, use of persuasive techniques. You all know what they are. You've got a clear point of view and it is well expressed. Write those success criteria into your books, please. I'll give you 8 minutes to do that. Redrafting is simply rewriting and improving the piece of work while you're rewriting it. So I want you to pick one of the pieces of work that you've done, not the poetry, this is all just the speech stuff, one of the speeches that you've written or parts of speeches that you've written, one that you think is the best, has got the most potential perhaps, and then get that in front of you, and the rest of the slides will be us going over that, or rather you going over it and improving it. So I'll just give you, well, as long as it takes really, to find a speech that you feel you can work on today, and then on to the next slide. Okay, now read the speech over again and work out what are the main points that you make on it and put them onto post-it notes or different pieces of cut up paper. Really, you just need 2. You could just do this as a list if you haven't got that. You want a list of points that are for your point that you're making, and a list of points that are against it if necessary, if you've done that. If not, if you haven't done that argument, counter argument thing, that's fine. Just make a list of the points that you make in your speech, in which case you won't need the coloured paper or anything. And then really you're making a list of all the points you make in the speech, and then think about what order they could go in. You know, you want to start out with something quite dramatic and emotional perhaps, but not your main point at the beginning. It should really build up to your main point. Anyway, so order them, order the points in what you think would be the most effective way. And then when you've done that, make a list of them in that order. I'll give you 15 minutes to do that. You need to make at least 3 points, possibly 4, as you can see here. Here's how you would plan it. Your introduction, to engage your audience and introduce your topic early. Hello, my name's Jasmine and I'm here today to talk to you about whatever it is you want to talk about. And I feel this way about it. So lay out your stall early on. And then point 1, firstly, I'd like to talk to you about this aspect of my point. And then also, you have a connective there, a discourse marker, point 2, then point 3, possibly point 4, and then a conclusion. You need to wrap it up. So I feel this way about this, and this is what I'd like to happen. So there we are. That's how you would plan the speech. Discourse markers, as I said, it's just quite a posh way of saying things that sort of signpost your argument as you go along. So at the beginning, you might say, to begin with, firstly, secondly, thirdly, in the beginning, and then when you're explaining, in addition to this, what's more, furthermore, these are all things that you've used in other pieces of writing, and then alternative interpretation. But however, some people might feel that this, but I'm here to tell you this. So if we were saying, remember the argument or the speeches we had about football wages and whether women should be paid the same amount as men, and we used that argument. Well, Matt, I think, was arguing that women shouldn't be paid as much because they don't play it as well. So you could say, well, I don't think women should be paid as much because they don't they don't play as well, and therefore they don't draw the same crowds. And then you would say, however, I know that some people do think that were we to pay them the same amount, then they would become fitter and better. I'm here to tell you that's not the case. That's how you do the alternative interpretations part of it. And then concluding. In conclusion, to conclude, on the whole, you get the picture, year 10. Now, if you were looking at this as someone who's marking it or someone who's listening to it, who is your audience? You need to know, you've got to be very clear about who your audience is. So going back to that football debate, you could be talking, if you were talking to the FA about it, it would be very formal, wouldn't it? Well, speeches are quite formal anyway, no slang. But if it was the FA you were talking to, a panel from the FA, it would be very formal. Whereas if you were perhaps addressing a room full of football supporters about it, it would have a different tone to it. So you need to decide who your audience is. And then when you've done that, have a look at your work. Is there what's in there that shows that you know who your audience is? And that leads straight in to the formal, how formal or not are you? If you were talking about the football and you're addressing the FA, it would be very formal. If you're addressing a room full of football supporters, still formal, but less so. And we need to, use as impressive a vocabulary as we can. Instead of just important, there's all these other words. Look, crucial, essential, significant, momentous. So you can see those there. I don't need to read them out. But you might want to memorise that. Well, I would memorise a couple of those because, good is one that gets used a lot. It was good this, it was good that. What about outstanding, beneficial, superb, exceptional, worthy, magnificent, or faultless? You start using those words, you go right up the mark scheme just by using a couple of those words. So write those words down into your books as alternatives to the ones at the top, and I'll give you 10 minutes to do that. Now, we're making a speech. We're trying to change people's minds. So we need to be persuasive. I don't need to go through there. I put them all there. Look, I won't read them out. Those are all the things that you need to remember. We've done quite a lot of that. That should be more or less impressed into your brains. You don't necessarily have to use them all, but when you're looking at your speech and looking to redraft it, highlight the ones that you have used, and then use the ones that you haven't. And also, vary your sentence. You can start with your sentence openings. You can start with the time, in the morning, early this evening, and then begin with an adverb. Regrettably, I find myself yet again defending the fact or saying that women should not be paid the same amount as men in football. Going back to that speech. So you can begin your sentence with an ing word. Having spent time doing homework myself, completing endless amounts of homework can be very damaging. Actually, that's ending it, isn't it? So we're ending it with an ing word. Anyway, what you need to do now is to write up your improved speech and send it to me. You know what it is that you need to do. You can go back over this lesson and stop it at any time. write up your speech, send it to me. The email address will be on class charts. And again, congratulations on all the work you're doing. I'm very happy to see it every day, and I will, well, I'll speak to you next week now. Have a lovely weekend.